Hello, everybody. My name is David Wiedemann, and this is 5 Minutes of Thought, episode number 32. Digging in, feelings as the door to organizational growth. This one has a couple additional slogans. Feelings matter, and if you feel it, say it. What's the big idea today? It's this. Feelings, if you can name them and share them, are a direct path to organizational growth, maybe the only path. Can I defend that claim? That's what I'm going to try to do today in 4 steps. Talk about feelings, talking about naming and sharing. We'll ask so what, and we'll reflect, and hopefully wondrous things will ensue. Let's start with feelings. Imagine you're at the end of a normal workday, and you're going to look back over the day, and you're going to grab the main events that happened that day, and you're going to kind of throw them on a graph, which has the axes quality over time. Let's do it. So you drive to work. That was kind of middling, not a lot of traffic. So that's in the middle of the graph. You have a pretty good phone call with the client, put that kind of high. Not a great lunch with a mediocre pair, not much over halfway. Then you get a great feedback from your boss on your report. That goes up pretty high. Then you have a meeting with Chuck where Chuck kind of pushes your buttons. Kind of felt a little icky. That goes down low. And then you do some emails, neither here nor there. And you end up with a kind of a fun webinar at the end of the day, and the day looks like something like this. And as you look back over the day, most of these things are kind of innocuous, and they just recede back into the sands of forgetfulness and time, except for one. That meeting with Chuck, that got your attention. It's kind of sticking with you. Something happened there, you don't know what. Feeling of lingering unease, quite put your finger on it, something under your skin. There's a sense that Chuck was kind of out of line, but maybe you were a little bit out of line too, but you're not sure how. Something's going on. Okay, this is the core seminal beginning point for the kinds of feelings and thoughts that can improve your relationships and your organization. So this is kind of a wonderful present from the universe when you have one of these things. And the question is, what do you do with it? Do you ignore it or do you dig into it? I think most of the time we ignore these. You can't dig into every single little thing that feels a little bit wonky that happens in your life. However, if you want to improve the world around you, you're going to need to dig into some of these because these are the way to improve the organization direct path. And you should know that ignoring these pretty much guarantees they will repeat. And each time they repeat, there'll be an accumulation of bad feelings and concerns and annoyances like wet spring snow falling on a fragile redwood branch. Eventually, it'll just crack. But by digging in, you can stop that process and improve the world around you. So it's good to practice. So let's talk about what it means to dig in. As usual, it's easy to understand in theory, but it's hard to do in practice. Here goes. You start with the icky feelings that were generated by your meeting with Chuck. The first thing you do is you examine those feelings. Most people kind of do this by going through an internal Rolodex of feelings. They sift through them. Is it indignation? Is it that I'm not being listened to? Am I feeling I'm not being trusted? What's going on? And let's say in this case you settle on a couple of feelings, and it's not unusual that there are 2 or 3 feelings going on at the same time. Let's lock those in. Let's say you're feeling angry and a little mistrusted. The consequence step comes next. As soon as you can identify and name the feelings you're feeling, most people experience a decrease in the intensity of those feelings. As you get your head around it, it makes you feel better. So there's a therapeutic advantage to doing this. The second step you have to do is frame a message around these feelings. My coaching clients called this the Wiedemann rule, naming it after me. If you feel it, you have to say it. I want to add a qualification to this, if you can do it safely. The main thing for this presentation is to imagine how you would frame the message, not so much to go into the actual process of having the conversation. That enters into difficult conversation territory, and there's a lot to think about there. But you can get a lot of the benefit of the conversation just by imagining how it might go. How would you do that? Well, you might think to yourself, what kind of context would I want to have this conversation in? You might ask yourself, what would I actually say? What words would I use? How would I phrase what I want to say? You might wonder what their perspective is. You might ask what they would say in response. And then another good suggestion is to think about what the ideal outcome would be for you. In these conversations that accrue from one of these things, there's usually a few phases. You say your thing, they say the thing, you work on it a little bit, and then there's a moment where you both try to figure out what's next. And if you have an idea about what you want to be next in mind before you go into the conversation, that's helpful. Okay, so I said if we did these things, if we looked at the feelings, named them, saw the feeling decrease, and we framed a message, it would lead to organizational improvement. But how does that work exactly? Okay, it's about rules. Any situation where you have that icky feeling, that wonky feeling, that feeling of something's not right, of everybody being implicated, that usually means there are rules at play. People's assumptions about what is supposed to happen in the workplace are being challenged. Somebody's legal system of internal rules is sliding down a slope, and it doesn't feel good. What rules am I talking about? Things like this. How you should be treated, how you should treat each other, how you make decisions, who's in charge, whether you need to get buy-in to do something, how you run meetings, what even qualifies as expertise. People have their own internal rule systems that can be in conflict with each other, and the workplace has collective rule systems that can be in conflict with themselves and with individual rule systems. So let's say in this case, the rule that was sort of being challenged was this, whether you need to get buy-in. Let's say that Chuck, the reason you argued was that Chuck is writing a proposal, and it has consequences for your team. And he's in a hurry, and he doesn't really want to have to wait for your complete buy-in. His rule system behind this might be something like this. I won't meet my deadline if I need buy-in, and I always meet my deadlines, right? And your rule system might be something like this. Nobody's going to put through a proposal that affects my team without my input because I protect my team. So you can see two actually good rules that are in conflict with each other. And if you can have this conversation where you share with Chuck how you were feeling about what was going on for you, you might be creating a space in which you can surface these rules and find a way to reconcile them. And in that way, you'll be reestablishing the legal system on a solid ground. What do I mean? You might come up with a rule like this that works for both of you. Yes, input on a proposal like this is required, and it is in a limited time window so that the proposal isn't slowed down, but people get to have input. And there's a way to reconcile just about any rule conflict like this in the workplace, if you can create the space to do it. So we dug into it, but how does that improve the organization? Well, you and Chuck are the organization. You and Chuck working together is part of the organization, so that coming up with rules that you work together helps everybody. The rule you create is a rule that other people can use, but the most important thing is if you figured out a way to surface and rewrite rules together, that's something that's going to serve you and the organization indefinitely and can be reused again and again. And this is the way organizations change and get better, is individuals in them figure out ways to surface the rules that are in conflict and adjust the rules. Okay, we're at the so what stage. So what? So what? Digging into it or choosing to ignore it. Why would you want to dig into it? Here's why. Organizations are rule systems. Rewriting the rules is how you improve, and feelings are the ink of the quill that rewrites the rules. Here it is, writing. That is why we chant slogan number 1, feelings matter, and we chant slogan number 2, if you feel it, say it, with the caveat, if you can figure out a safe way to do that. Pause and reflect with me. Did this trigger any thoughts, ideas, or feelings? Track those down, and you may be on your way to a personal learning cycle. And if you really like this, see if you can't pop up from behind your cubicle and explain it all to the person in the next cubicle, like these two little people did or are doing in this picture. Okay, we talked about feelings. We talked about naming and sharing. We asked so what, and we reflected. Hopefully wondrous things ensued on your end of this communication. I am David Wiedemann. This has been 5 Minutes of Thought, episode number 32, digging in feelings as a door to organizational growth with the famous slogan, feelings matter. And as usual, I leave you with a provocative idea. This one comes from Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy. This is their famous immunity to change graph of the immunity system that keeps you from changing.